didn't.
Boy, we should order after this.
I think so.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Ice Team Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Durham. I'm sitting across the table today from Tony Mariotti, a notorious dude in the fishing industry, and we are at a notorious place.
One of my favorites.
I love this place because I think if you ice fish in Minnesota, you have probably either been past here or you've visited. Tony, where are we?
We are at the original O.B.T, the Osage Bait Tackle Company, the only place you can eat here, get gas, and worms.
And you can buy a T-shirt that says that.
As well as minnows and anything else.
I think we should get matching T-shirts today.
I don't know why we wouldn't.
This sounds like a good plan from the start. But one of the cool things, too, driving past here, you go past Straight Lake.
Indeed. You know, we oftentimes joke about the fact that you and I only live 35 miles apart and we don't fish together very often because you have to pass an awful lot of good lakes to get to me, and I have to pass an awful lot of good lakes to get to you.
And there's people on the ice right now. I mean, we're at the very beginning of the ice season. I mean, I'm not ready to walk out there yet. Are you?
I'm not really either, you know, but Little Detroit reports this morning were 6 inches of good, clear ice. And guys are out there, you know, anywhere from 2.5 to 4.5 inches on a lot of other lakes. And it's cold, buddy. It's cold out.
It's cold. The 2.5, I don't, it doesn't jive with me.
No, and you're a lot littler than I am, so I really like a good 4 to 6 inches before I start venturing out. But, you know, with these cold temps and the lack of snow, we're going to be there very soon.
For sure. The hard thing, though, is that, like Straight Lake, for instance, you've got this mill pond area that obviously that freezes really quick, and there's probably a half dozen vehicles down there right now. But you get out to the main lake, you can't get out on it.
No, for sure. And this is where you have to be smart. Early ice is, you know, when I always say, keep your kids off the ice, keep your pets off the ice, because unless you know the lake intimately, it's a dangerous time to be venturing out.
For sure. Well, Tony, I was going to start this episode out by introducing you and your background and what you do in the fishing industry and all of it, but I feel like you've told that story a lot of times.
I have. I've been around for quite a while. I think I've been with a lot of these companies for 24, 25 years. You know, I think this will be my 21st St. Paul Ice Show coming up. And yeah, it's been just a great industry to be part of. It's been crazy to see the changes that have come and gone. And, you know, it's been fun meeting guys like you and the whole crew.
Well, one of the things I was reflecting on this morning was you and I and a lot of others in the industry are internet babies, that we were just coming in the industry and evolving about the time that the internet started, and what a ride.
It really was. You know, I oftentimes say it was at the infancy of the internet, and people don't understand, you know, those old talk forums, the Fishing Minnesota days, the Fishing Buddy days. You know, that's how I got my start. And actually, my start with the outdoors came via a lot of those websites, but on the hunting side. I was much more active on the hunting side than I was the fishing side. I guided some bear hunters when I was a school teacher like yourself, and it just kind of went from the hunting side to the fishing world, and it's been crazy to be part of the ride.
No doubt. Do you hunt as much as you used to?
No, not even close. You know, I think a big part of it was I went by on the internet. I went by bird dog, and I had bird dogs. I was big into upland bird hunting. I had out west and chased sharptails and huns and pheasants. Loved the big game hunting with bear hunting available in Minnesota, and I got to go out west a lot and hunt big game. And then I got married, and there was an evolution of, I moved to Detroit Lakes, an area that I was familiar with. I grew up not far from there, and it was just an awesome area for fishing. And then once I put my dogs down, I didn't get hunting dogs again. I have really not looked back, and I get out and do a little bit of hunting, but definitely spend a lot more time in the fishing realm.
Do you have any dogs now?
We have a little ankle biter, Vinny.
Not a hunting dog?
Not a hunting dog. He was a COVID dog. We were home, and kids needed a companion, so we got a Vinny. It was a birthday gift of mine.
It's interesting how life changes like that. Well, when are you going to get out? When is your, I mean, I know that you can't predict things because of the weather, but you can predict things because of your calendar. How long will it be? Somebody who's a hardcore ice angler, but has a lot on their plate in life. When is Tony Mariotti going to get out on first ice?
You know, I would have said it will be after the St. Paul Ice Show. That week after, typically I would get out. But our friend Jason Mitchell called, and he's going to be in town for some Shields training next week, and he's hoping to sneak out one day next week. So I am looking at maybe Wednesday afternoon, evening time. Might be my first time on the ice. We might go try an old haunt of mine that I haven't been to in a few years, but it usually is a pretty good first ice bite. We'll be fishing panfish. It'll be hopefully some big bluegills and some bonus big crappies thrown in.
What does the area look like? Just kind of the depth, structure, bottom structure?
Yep, it is it's a primary basin right off a giant weed flat. And early ice, a lot of times we have success right up along those weeds, right on the edges of the weeds. But as the evening, as that sun starts to set, those fish, they don't necessarily move over the basin completely, but they'll slide out a little bit from the weeds, and that must be where they're finding food, because we'll be fishing them in anywhere from 15 to 12, 11 feet of water, and it'll be just on the edge of the weeds. We won't be in the weeds. We'll be on the edges.
I always find it interesting when people say, well, we found the fish here because of this, and they define why those fish are in that area, but ultimately we don't know for sure.
There is no way to always know.
I love that you said, I think it's because there's probably food out in that basin.
Sure.
But what other reason would it be that they could be there?
Well, it could be the oxygen levels are good. It could be that they're safe. Maybe that's when the predator fish are moving into those weeds and kind of chase them out over the basin. I'm not real sure, but usually I tend to think that it's food related, that there's a reason that they're moving out, whether it's the plankton or things that are coming, little invertebrates that are coming out of the weeds are something that they're chasing to eat. I don't know. That's just where they are, and it takes a lot of drilling, and it takes a lot of, being successful at times and also striking out at times to kind of put these patterns together. But this is just a lake that I have fished for enough years that this is where the fish always are this time of year, and I'll get out and take full advantage of the research I did 15, 20 years ago, because it still holds true.
And how long will that bite last, approximately?
It'll be good until they truly move out over that basin come end of January, and then again all the way to late ice. What's interesting about this lake is that there's really no night bite. Once the sun sets, you got about a half hour, and then those fish disappear, or even the ones that stay there, they just seem to get lockjaw, and they don't bite after dark very often.
Have you ever tried it, like staying overnight in that spot, ice camping, and seeing if you have any rattle reels go off middle of the night? I
have. I actually had a big permanent house that we had on that spot for one season, and I don't think we ever caught a fish after 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And we'd spend the whole night. We'd watch the flashers, we'd watch my Vexilars, and we saw fish. They just had no interest in biting, and they certainly weren't congregated the way that they showed up. Then again, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, here they are again. And I'm sure that they go somewhere, and a guy could probably hop around and find them. But, this was, when I was fishing there, it was way before forward-facing sonar came out, and you weren't able to kind of follow the fish. And for whatever reason, there are some lakes where it just doesn't seem that those fish are active at all after dark, and you just got to wait them out.
When you talk to locals and they give you that information that, this isn't really a night lake, a lot of times you can take that to heart, but not always.
Not always.
I mean, look at what happened with forward-facing sonar and whether it's crappies or walleyes, anything, and we had our assumptions of what those fish do, and then all of a sudden we learned the truth, and that our assumptions weren't correct.
That is absolutely true. And, that's one of the things that really speaks volumes for the forward-facing sonar, and also the evolution of fishermen. As technology advances, as we advance, there's a lot of times now that you don't have to go spend, a day burning through 3 tanks of gas in the auger as you go rip apart a lake looking for where these fish might have gone. You can now kind of plant yourself down and see where they go, make your move, your calculated move, and be able to be successful.
Is forward-facing sonar contributing or helping with obesity?
I don't see a correlation between the two at all.
Well, because if you have the ability to drill a hole, scan around, find the fish first, not have to drill that massive grid of holes just to find them? Or is it that you're on that constant search now, that you are on high alert bird dogging it the whole time and constantly moving to find them?
I think there's a lot more of that. And the other thing that I've learned a lot from the forward-facing sonar is I used to grid a whole area, and you'd kind of have to hole hop from spot to spot, and you'd get on fish occasionally. What I find now with forward-facing sonar is that the fish seem to always be wherever there isn't holes. I can be in an area, they might move 40 feet, 80 feet, 20 feet, and as you kind of grid that area out, and you now drill holes at 40 feet, at 80 feet, then you move over here to 20 feet. When those fish disappear and you go back to the forward-facing sonar, they are almost always wherever there isn't a hole, which I think speaks volumes to light sensitivity. That when that light shines through, those fish seem to want to get away from it. Could it be because that's where we're walking and we're chasing them to those areas? Possibly, but there's also something to be said about fish just like that cover of darkness, and they like to be tucked where there isn't holes right above them.
It makes sense. Do you run forward-facing sonar?
I have. I've used it in the past. It is not something that I will take out all the time. I am much more satisfied, or I'm much more able to be quick on my feet and search an area by just bringing my Vexilar and a rod. That's more my MO.
I like that you said you're more satisfied. You find more satisfaction in that. Isn't that the reason we're all fishing?
We are. And I don't mean it to like a look down your nose way. I just find it's not something that I need for a lot of the lakes that I fish. These are fish. This isn't rocket science. Get out there, pop some holes in areas that look good on the map, or a lot of these lakes in the Detroit Lakes area I've fished for years, and I kind of have a general area where I know these fish are going to be in this area. I might have to drill 20, 30 holes to actually find where they're at. But I can do that just as quickly, and sometimes a lot easier than lugging out the weight and the heft of a forward-facing sonar, getting 2 holes drilled to set it up, try to find the fish. And it may cut down the amount of holes that I have to drill initially, but to stay on those fish, you're going to have to keep drilling. So I go back to the old school, drill my 30, 40 holes before I even start fishing a lot of times, and I can just hop around. And, it's worked for years, and I maybe it's the old dog, new trick type thing, but it seems to work for me, and I'll continue doing it.
There's something to be said about that simplicity, too, especially when you have a short amount of time. You get back from work and you're like, I have an hour and a half. And that has to include my travel time to the lake,
sure,
drilling the holes, setting up. I don't want to take a bunch of stuff.
Right. I can carry my K-drill with my Milwaukee drill. I can carry 2 rods and my Vexilar, and I am lightweight, I'm efficient. I've got everything I need to fish for as long as I typically have the ability to do.
There's been so many advances in the equipment too, and would you say that across the board, from company to company, for the most part, that you're not going to find something that is generic? I mean, I used to feel like back in the day you'd find generic items that were just kind of, they popped up here and there, and they were cheaply made, but they worked well for its purpose for a short period of time. But now it seems like everything is very close in quality.
Sure. I think, that being said, I think that the companies or the products that just weren't very high quality, they got weeded out in a hurry, because word travels fast, especially with the internet. If something's made poorly, or it just doesn't work, or if it's going to break after the first time you use it, word gets out, and those companies have 2 options. They either beef up their product and do a little bit more research, or they go out of business. And so no, the generic side seems to be less and less, and very few things are poorly built anymore, from rods to tackle to electronics. These companies wouldn't be in business if their products weren't quality.
Exactly. But there are still going to be certain items that are somewhat disposable. And I would say somewhat. And say take like a small plastic ice scoop.
I haven't used one of those in years.
I mean, that is just like, there's so many anglers that have that. The original was, I'm trying to think what company it was. I can see the tag.
So can I.
But an orange scoop, aluminum handle.
Yep.
Easy to bend the handle, so you can make a little loop, hang it on your belt, whatever you want to do. And people do that all the time.
For sure.
But think about that little scoop, and just, I mean, can you do it better? Probably not. I mean,
they've tried. Remember the Big Dipper? That had the big square hockey handle with the, with the large cup.
Yeah, can you beat that?
You know, that was a beefed up product. Then you went to the retractable kind that fit into whether you were using an 8 or 10-inch hole. You pushed them down and the flaps went up on the side. Then you gave it a quick pull up and it fanned out.
The inhaler, the slush inhaler.
And you had the slush inhaler. That was kind of a have to have for guys in wheelhouses.
I saw one yesterday at Reed's.
Sure.
Yep.
And, so, the innovations that have come from as simple as a scoop to look at the tackle we use and the rods and reels and all the equipment out there, to our suits. Look at the difference in the float suit technology, the buoyancy assistance, and just how much more comfortable, how much more waterproof, windproof, and warm these suits are from when we first started out.
For sure. I was thinking about tackle this morning. I was thinking about the whole lineup of jigs that Clam has, and there's a lot of companies that have a vast lineup of jigs, right? But out of all of Clam's, just the jigs, not the spoons.
Okay.
Which one is the best in your mind?
This is
you
tough
can only pick one. You can only pick one jig. No, you only get one. One jig.
Oh boy. If I had to pick one, it would probably. Gosh, there's two that I go back and forth with. But if I had to pick one jig, and this is going to be my crappie jig, I am going to use the duckbill drop.
Really?
Yep, I like that horizontal presentation. I can put a great big Mackie Minnow XL on there, and when I'm fishing cabbage weeds for big crappies, for whatever reason, I like that big profile. I think when the sun is out, it gives it a heck of a shadow. Fish can see that, and that is probably my go-to. Not one of the more popular jigs, but it's probably my go-to when times get tough.
This really surprises me because I don't think I've ever heard anybody say their go-to is the duckbill drop, and for no good reason, honestly. That is a great jig. I use it a lot.
Yep.
You have to be really careful about the plastic and just the way you hook it so it doesn't track in a circle.
Yep. And you have to make sure you adjust your knot to keep that thing completely horizontal. But once you do that, it's a jig that I really like for weed fishing, and a lot of the winter I'm weed fishing, so it makes sense that's probably one that I would say is right on top of my list.
And just with the way that thing is designed and weighted, you can give it a ton of action.
Sure.
I mean, it moves like mad. I personally, I was thinking about this long and hard last night because there's so many different options, right?
Mm-hmm.
My choice is the drop jig.
The drop jig, and that wouldn't even be in my top probably 6 or 7.
Really?
It's not a jig that I use a lot. It's a great jig, but it's not one that I've built a lot of confidence in, and so and the drop kick and the drop jig, both are they're in my arsenal, but they're probably not going to be the first ones tied on.
And see, I would go with the drop jig with the whole basis of that's what the platform for just about every jig is.
Sure.
I mean, everything is kind of built off of it. The original, the OG.
Boy, that term gets thrown around a lot.
It does. It does. But what jig do you remember using first as a kid?
One of the first jigs I remember using was, I'm not going to think of the name. It was a custom jig and spin. It had that little diamond on the top. Maybe it was the diamond jig.
It was.
That, when I was in college, I remember that was one of the first true confident builder jigs that I had. It was just the lead jig, and it had that little diamond on the top. But boy, that thing seemed to catch a lot of fish. And, you don't take into consideration that we were young and ambitious, and, it was probably a lot of the hard work we were putting in that was actually putting fish topside. But that was the new kind of up-and-coming jig that was out there, and I remember vividly teaming that up with, 4-pound test and an ice buster bobber, and going out and sitting on Grace Lake in Bemidji and catching those crappies after dark, or Fox Lake, and getting up. And those are the memories that I have of college age, which now was a long time ago for us.
That is a lot. I mean, 20 years feels like 2 days.
Oh, doesn't it?
For sure. It's kind of, you and I are about the same age, right around that 50-year-old mark. And
You look much older than me.
I look way older than you.
It's that hard life.
It is. It's yeah, that's exactly what it is. You were talking about some of those lakes you liked to fish, back when you were younger. And by the way, I think my first jig was probably a teardrop. Just
Sure.
one of the old teardrops you'd get off a card, probably a custom jigs or something like that. But then there was one my dad really liked that was just this little spider jig. It was a gold spider jig, and kind of not really a teardrop, but just a couple rubber bands hanging off his legs. And
Sure. Just had a different profile.
My dad always had secret baits. Did your dad ever have secret baits?
He certainly did. My dad for years always told me you can use any color you want when you're fishing muskies as long as it's black.
Yeah, my neighbor always said it as long as it's black and orange.
Yep, and I've actually met your dad and fished with your dad, and
yes.
Even at that time, he introduced me to one of his kind of favorite little baits. I don't know if I even dare mention it, but
go ahead.
A local guy in Park Rapids or Nevis.
Nevis, the Irvin's Magic Jig.
Yep,
the open water.
I had got a whole cart of them from your dad, and they get used. They get used by me, and they're a good little jig.
They are. But I always think of like my dad when we would ice fish. He would sometimes hear from the older ice anglers, the legends. They had their own little secrets, right? Everybody had a little something that they did.
Right.
And one was to use bacon fat as bait.
Ooh.
And so you would cut that into a little kind of V wedge and hook that on. I mean, it was before plastic, so essentially it was a pork rind.
Or a pig in a jig.
Yeah, jig and pig. Yeah, for sure. And the other one that he would do, my dad was a postal worker, a mailman, and they would get these bundles of mail that were bound with these thick red rubber bands, these giant red rubber bands.
Okay.
And every once in a while he would bring one home, and we'd cut it into these little tails, and that was the deal, the red tail on there.
Of course.
But again, I mean, at that time, plastics weren't available. You could not go to a tackle shop and buy plastics for ice fishing.
You don't know, and I can honestly say I still remember my first kind of introductions to plastics, and this is funny because my wife and I had been married 1 or 2 years. We had a newborn daughter, so this would have been right around 2008. And I remember getting a call from Jason Mitchell and said, "Hey, man, are you familiar with soft plastics? Do you fish a lot of soft plastics?" And I said, yeah, sure, I can. He said, "I'm really looking at doing a sight fishing show on soft plastics. Could we make it work this week?" I said, "Yeah, I've got a spot where I can sight fish, and yeah, well, let's shoot for later on in the week." And I remember hanging up and running to the bait store and buying every soft plastic they had because I'd never used them before. And okay, I've got to figure this out.
Hey, what did you buy?
At the time, I think Northland was about the only thing that had a lot. That was a big company they had like the smelt fry or the fry baits. Most of these were really, really hard baits. They didn't have a lot of action. And this is after, I think in the tournament days, again, 25 years ago, a lot of these guys, there were companies like Little Adam and Mackey that only the tournament guys really knew about and were using. These weren't sold at your local bait stores. These weren't available, online wasn't even really a thing. You had to know somebody to get these baits. But I remember going and buying a whole bunch of different plastics and then going out to Big Cormorant Lake in the shallow water where I knew I did a lot of sight fishing and just playing with those baits. And looking back, this is how much the industry's changed. Back in those days, I would sit with my high 8 or my digital 8 handy cam, and I'd put it on a tripod right over the hole, and I'd zoom in, and you'd see how those plastics reacted, and then you'd watch how the fish reacts, and spend all day doing that. And then at night, I'd come home, and I'd plug that handy cam back in, and I'd go back and watch hour after hour, and then I'd sit with a pen and paper and be like, at 1:36, Northern comes in. At 2:31, Sunfish eats. At 3:18, Crappies come in. And then that's what I would send that tape and that note back for editing, and they could take all those little pieces out and they could, piece it together and use as part of the show. And crazy.
Yeah, it's bananas, some of that legwork that had to be done to create any of that. And I think there's a lot of people that don't realize it or appreciate it because they didn't know
right
that ever existed.
Yep. So that was my introduction to the soft plastics, and now I mean, they're pretty much a staple of anybody who fishes a lot of panfish, or is going to go out, maybe not necessarily the recreational, get out once in a while, but if you fish a lot, you have soft plastics always with you, because there are days when that soft plastic bite is phenomenal, and not that waxworms or something like that won't work, but you're just much more efficient, and there are days when soft plastics shine over live bait.
I agree with that too. I was thinking about the nuggies back in the day.
Yep.
That was the first one that I ever saw, and I don't remember who it was. I know it was on a clam shoot somewhere, and I think it might have been Corey Bechtold that had nuggies, and I was going, "Oh, I like these. I want these.
Mm-hmm.
I want these in my life and in my tackle box."
Hands down, that was my secret bait for years and years, that when times got tough, I'd pull out a nuggie, and that old nuggie always seemed to break the curse for me and got it done. And you're right. I mean, that was before clam had soft plastics, before a lot of people had the true soft plastics. They were kind of the hard, rigid plastics, like I said, or even the thick rubber band.
Right, exactly. It didn't have the same type of movement. Well, I remember a shoot that I was on. It was myself, Chip Lear, and Eric Osberg.
Okay.
And I don't remember what we were doing the shoot for. I think it was something that Chip was doing with Fishing the Wild Side, I believe. And we went down to Fourth Crowing Lake. And in my area, the Crowings are 11 lakes, a chain of them. And they're all pretty shallow, really great for duck hunting, that's for sure. There's tons of rice. But they rejuvenate really quickly, too. They get some angling pressure, and they seem to always come back.
Sure.
Well, we're trying to just catch a few bluegills on camera, and we cannot get anything to bite. And we're seeing fish. We're seeing them. But waxworms are not doing it, spikes, anything live bait. And Chip's got these plastics with, and one of them was the Northland mayfly.
Yep.
And my gosh, we just started catching fish like you wouldn't believe. And and it was truly a time where the plastic outfished the live bait notably. Yep. I mean, there was no question.
Now, that being said, I can also tell you of a shoot that we did. We were filming a show, and we had tons of soft plastics, and we had one little container of waxworms, and we couldn't catch fish on a soft plastic. It was to the point where we were digging through the remnants of the holes and the shavings from the ice. Any little chunk of a live or a dead waxworm is what you needed to get these fish to bite. And so, I mean, yeah, it can truly depend on the day. An angler has to be willing to try different things in order to be successful, because it just doesn't always work the way you plan for it to.
What about fish scents? Did you ever play around with them? Like, when I know, Tony, that today, if I went through your tackle box, you don't have 5 bottles of fish scent in there that you're carrying around every time you're going on the lake.
I certainly do not. A lot of these plastics now are infused with the scent, whether you got the Mackie juice or the Mackie scent, or the Nuniku plastics have their fish scent, things like that. I never got big into scent, but I have some buddies that did. I have a buddy, Matt, that he's a guy that was always soaking his minnows in WD-40. Or this, and the guy had a lot of success, and he, a lot of times he wouldn't even tell us this until afterwards, but he was playing with scents, for a long time, and I bet you if you look in his tackle box, he's still got the 5 bottles of scents, because they work for him.
Was he a Preparation H guy too?
Ooh, I don't know.
Remember that?
Yes.
That was it's got shark oil in it. That's why.
Yep. And Ben Gay was another one. Anything to get that oil. Oh, the oil.
Oh, come on! I never heard of Ben Gay.
Ben Gay, yeah, you get the oil from the Ben Gay. It was just like fish oil. It just comes off. Fish can see it. It spreads its scent in the water like a. Another thing was, remember the can of sardines? You ever throw a can of sardines down the hole?
No.
Oh my gosh. I watched a giant pike get caught on Lake of the Woods in the hole next to the one that a guy had just chummed with kipper snacks. And fish oil.
Well, okay, but back to the Ben Gay. That's like what do you call it?
Therapeutic medicine, a menthol.
Menthol.
Yeah.
I wanted to say methanol.
No, not methanol, but
menthol. Mentholyptus.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like
Eucalyptus.
that minty eucalyptus smell. You think fish are attracted?
I don't know, but guys have done it. Guys used it.
Boy, I don't know about this.
Well, we can try it. Maybe we should try it. We might be missing the boat here. Maybe this is our new thing. Ben Gay scented soft plastics.
Do you have it in your medicine cabinet?
I don't. I'm that old.
And do you call it a medicine cabinet or a medicine chest?
No, it's a medicine cabinet.
Okay.
But I don't think there's much in there besides maybe some baby aspirin and Band-Aids.
Neither of which are going to help your fishing success.
No.
I had a buddy that was big into Bang. Do you remember that scent?
I don't remember Bang.
Bang was a good one that, it was a aerosol.
Okay,
And
yep.
he would use it open water quite a bit. But
Bass fishing, walleye
a
fishing?
lot of times bass fishing, crayfish scent,
Yep.
smallies. They well, I don't know if they liked it or not. You wouldn't know any difference.
No.
I've always had this idea in my head that if you put fish scent on, you just spray it on or dunk it, right? That you put the bait in the water and it doesn't make sense, right? It's going to wash it off.
You would think so.
But you give me your take on this first.
Well, I almost wonder, is that what the attractant is? Is that oily, that residue that it's giving off?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that fish, when they are going to bite, I don't know that they are taking time, 99% of the time, to smell, check it out, watch it, feel it. Usually, if a fish is coming in hot, they're going to bite. And
But it may be that scent has an influence on their decision making that makes them continue on with that decision making process.
It could, but boy, then their brains work awfully quickly because, look at how when you see a fish screaming up, do you really think that they took time to decide that it was the scent that brought them in, or was it just that there was something there and they're eating? I don't know.
I don't either. But here's something that helped cure my thoughts about fish scent washing off.
You got it on your hands.
Well, no. A few days ago was Thanksgiving.
Oh, yes.
And I had all these greasy dishes that sat in the sink. Okay, I'm a procrastinator. I don't love to do dishes. I don't know if any of the listeners love to do dishes, but I let them sit there for a day. And I came back, and a lot of that greasy stuff was still stuck on the pans, right?
Right.
And these are nonstick pans.
Okay.
So do you think maybe that greasy stuff, it just sticks there for days?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's a boy.
Here's the other thing though. When you bring a jig back in that you've put scent on, it doesn't feel sticky or greasy.
No,
you don't have
you
buildup
don't
in your tackle
smell
box.
it.
So maybe these companies making the scents need to revert back to the food industry.
Food grade
Food
grade scents brought to you by.
Have we come out to something?
Very well may have.
Think of this, Tony.
I bet you
Spray a
they've
little
got-
on your jig, spray a little in your mouth.
I bet you back here at O.B.T, they probably let us dip our jigs right in that frying grease, and we could go out and hit Straight Lake on the way home, and we could actually see if this theory works.
Oh my, this is not a bad idea. A combination food for human consumption and fish consumption. What is this?
Marshmallow. It's delicious. It's sticky. It's some marshmallow fluff.
So we already have some crossovers.
For sure.
Think about that. If you dunked a jig in marshmallow fluff and you dropped it in the lake, it's not going to wash off for a while.
No, you wouldn't think so. You put it on your fingers and dunk it in the lake. You got to scrub to get that off.
I don't like marshmallow fluff.
What is wrong with you?
What purpose does it have?
It's delicious. Add it with a little pineapple. Put it on ice cream.
Pineapple?
Whoa, pineapple and marshmallow. I could do a whole culinary show if we really wanted to get into this.
On marshmallow fluff.
Well, I don't know.
Just marshmallows in general are not high on my list. I did catch a trout on one once.
Several trout I've caught on marshmallows. Marshmallows are a fantastic bait, especially little colored ones. Put a little trout bead on there. Oh,
my first trout was cheese puff.
ooh. I have caught a walleye on an orange slice from Fleet Farm. Those gummy orange slices.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, we were up in Canada and the fish were biting, and what couldn't you catch them on? Happened to have a little orange slice from the gummy orange slices from Fleet Farm, and put one on and threw the jig down, and bam. Which again brings me right back to those fish really pay that much attention.
2 questions for you. Number 1, do you think you could replicate it here?
Oh, for sure.
You think you can catch a fish on an orange slice here?
I would be willing to bet.
Okay.
I don't know under a slip bob or something, but when you're actively jigging, 100%, you get those reaction bites.
Oh yeah, I would go with that.
I even think if you put one on a jigging wrap on the treble, because are they truly going after the orange slice? I don't know.
Yeah, then it's kind of like, is it really?
Right.
Is the orange slice having any impact? Question number 2 of that was, why do you have those orange slices? Those things are terrible.
No, you're thinking of circus peanuts.
No, I'm thinking of both. I know the difference.
Well, and circus peanuts, however delicious, I bet you they would also be
This
a good
is not happening.
Orange slices, that's a staple when you go to Canada. You have to stop at Fleet Farm and you pick up the Fleet Farm licorice, the red licorice, and you pick up the orange slices. These are just snacks in the boat.
No, when you stop in Canada, you stop at the gas station just over the border and buy the peanuts that are salt and pepper. And for whatever reason, these peanuts are the crunchiest.
Well, because they've been there for years. You're the only person that buys them. The only.
It could be.
So crunchy. No, they're stale.
Ugh. Canada. Let's talk Canada for a second.
I'm married to a Canadian.
I didn't realize Trish was from Canada. No, I think I did know that. Where in Canada?
Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
That's right. That's right.
Yep. So she is a true Canadian. Married her so she could get a green card to come down here, and and so I can go up there and fish and hunt a little bit. Works out well.
Yeah, I would say so. How did you two meet?
We met via mutual friends. We had some friends that she worked with one of my best friend's wives, and this was the internet days, so it was internet dating, and we met each other on the internet, and then we knew a lot of people in general. Turned out I've got crazy stories about, I had a bear hunter at one time up in camp that had to leave my camp because he was going to go on a date with this teacher from Detroit Lakes, and long story short, turned out he was going on a date with my future wife, and yeah, he left camp, and then I met Trish, and we've been married now going on 20 years, so
oh my gosh.
Crazy.
Oh my gosh. So how often do you get to Canada?
We get up there, pre-COVID, we went quite a bit. We'd get up 3, 4, 5 times a year. Since COVID, it's been a little bit tougher. We have young kids, or we've got kids in high school sports, and we chase hockey kids all winter, so I don't get up there a whole lot. We usually get up over Christmas and then once again in the summer, but I laugh every time we go up because I tell her dad and her uncles, they fish like cavemen to me, yet they manage to outfish me every single time. I remember going up to the Hanging Heart Lakes, and we were casting what you do for walleye, and I said, what are we going to fish for? Well, we're going after pickerel, and so what are we going to use? Well, 5 of diamonds. All right, so we're casting 5 of diamonds, and these guys are pulling in walleye left and right. And then he said, you want to try for some pike? And I said, yeah, what are we going to use? And he says, well, we'll just add a bit of beef. I said, what? And they open up their cooler, and they pull out a little steak. And now they have a 5 of diamonds, and they just cut off a little bit of beef, put it on there, and start casting, and now they're fishing for pike. And man, yeah, I show up with all the soft plastics and all the gear, and they're 5 of diamonds, and the 5 of diamonds with a bit of beef outfish me day in and day out.
Unbelievable. Well, and I've been on trips like this before, and especially where you go with somebody on their lake.
Yep.
The one that they have experienced so many trips on. They know it inside and out, and they know all those little nuances that you come in and you go, well, I know what I'm doing fishing. What are you catching them on? You're catching them this? Oh, I'll bring this other thing. It's going to do better.
Yep, perch fishing. You head up to Buffalo Pound right outside of Moose Jaw, and these guys show up with their 15-pound braid and their little hooks. And what do? The first perch they catch, they pop the eye out, and they're using perch eyes. Well, I bring my soft plastics, and I bring small jigs and 2-pound test, and I can't catch a perch to pop an eye out because they just, I don't know what they're doing, but it never fails. So I enjoy the humility, and I enjoy getting up there. I enjoy fishing Canada. I enjoy spending time up there. It's just an area that I think once I retire, I'll spend a lot more time up in that country.
Where's a place up there that you can't wait to get back to?
For me, it's probably Tobin Lake. Probably now 6-7 years ago, I did that Across the Ice Belt episode where on day 1 of fishing Tobin Lake with Jason Hamilton, none of us had been on the lake that year, and the first day, I caught my 4 biggest walleyes ever through the ice, including one that was 34 and a half inches, probably a 15 and a half pound fish, all on day 1. I've been up there open water fishing since, but I have not been back ice fishing, and I want to get back, and I will be back.
What about a place that you haven't been yet?
That would be Last Mountain Lake.
Last Mountain Lake. Is there actually a mountain on it?
I don't believe so. It's pretty flat in Saskatchewan.
What is the water like? I mean, are you looking at some of that really stained?
I would guess, like I said, I haven't been up there, but I would guess it's a stained water. It's basically a super long reservoir, much like Tobin, much like a lot of those lakes, is what I understand. I'm talking, 100 miles long, and it has the potential to put out big fish. It's just somewhere that I enjoy an adventure. I enjoy trying new spots, and occasionally, we've got a customer ready to hit the ice. He's got some wax worms and some shiner minnows.
See, I love seeing this. Gosh, we should just have him sit down and
get the scoop on
where the scoop's going. We got some sucker minnows and a big blue box of waxies.
I like it. I really like it. Yeah, the people are just gearing up for this ice season, and then that's what we're doing. We're talking ice fishing. We're talking destinations, but even more so than destinations, Jason, we live in an area. I mean, this is what they call the Lakes Country of Minnesota, between Park Rapids and Detroit Lakes, and there is so many fishable bodies of water around here that it's crazy.
I mean, I just love the area itself too, in terms of how kind of remote we are. That we're not. This is low key stuff. Like, okay, the guy that just came and bought bait, he left it sitting by the door and went back and sat down to eat.
Yep.
Nobody's going to take that.
No, my keys are sitting in my truck right now outside of Osage Bait Tackle, and chances are we're going to have a burger basket before we go, and I'm not worried about anything disappearing from my truck. It's a safe area. It's an area that I can go to some lakes that I know there's going to be people on, but I can also choose lakes up here that I guarantee I'm going to be the only person at the access. And that has a real appeal to me, and I think a lot of people that want to come up and fish this area, that should have an appeal to them, because there are places up here that you can truly explore and venture out, try new things. And when you stumble on a good one, it can be really good.
And most people up here are really welcoming in terms of, being forthcoming with, let's say you're out on a lake and there's another group out there and it's a small lake. The likelihood that they're going to come over and be mad that you're there at all it doesn't exist really. And just being courteous. But you do have to think about that part of it too, because if you're used to fishing in the metro,
sure,
you're used to fishing closer to people just because there are more people. And so, anglers are used to that. You get up here, people are used to a little more comfort zone and berm, I'd say.
Yeah, it is definitely. I mean, I just wouldn't fish within 40, 50 yards of people typically. You don't need to.
No.
When you're fishing a weed bite, that weed bed might run for 600 yards down the lake. And if somebody's fishing in a spot, there's no sense in setting up on them, because those fish are either running traffic, going back and forth through those weeds, moving up and down, or you're just going to find a different school and get on them. There's just, the vastness of the area and the number of lakes. I can't tell you how many times I've showed up at a lake and there's 4 trucks there, and I think I'm not going to go out and I'm not going to go deal with that today, and I just go drive to a different lake.
Yeah, you take 5 minutes.
Right, if that.
Right. Yeah, that's why I love this area so much too. Do you have any concern about more people moving up here and it becoming more developed and more like the Brainerd Lakes area?
I don't think that that's a concern, simply because most of these lakes, they're already developed. There's not a lot of options as far as people aren't going to be able to move up here and just build on these lakes. You look at your big lakes, Melissa, Sally, Big Detroit, all phenomenal fisheries that I spend time on all winter. There's nowhere left for people to come to.
Right.
Detroit Lakes, especially, it's a recreational area. It caters to the people that come from out of town, from the local restaurants to the hotels to the activities. We have that 412 Foundation now that they put the trolls in town, and they had the ice. They put up the giant ice castle, or the ice castle in the winter at times. They harvest the ice, and it's an area that there's so much recreation in the area, from Detroit Mountain, from the north of Nashville, where they bring up songwriters from Nashville to come in and do these things, to the ice fishing. Like I did a little promo for the Chamber of Commerce earlier this spring. I was catching crappies, and in the background, I could see one of these trolls. And I said, come for the trolls, stay for the fishing. And you don't see people, necessarily doing that, but it's just an area that you can come to. You can bring your family. There's a ton to do. Family-wise, there are nice restaurants or nice places where you can get out on a date night. And the outdoor opportunities are pretty much endless and really appealing to a lot of people or a lot of families. Mom and dad can go to a nice dinner, kids can go to the movies and do family things or take them to the mountain. And then at night, dad can maybe sneak away for a little bit and get on a really good crappie bite or walleye bite or whatever.
You brought up several different opportunities in the area, and you brought up this 412 Foundation or organization. I have questions about a lot of this stuff. For people listening, for sure, we got to bring up the trolls.
Oh, trolls.
Talk about the trolls a little bit.
So the trolls were, I believe his name's Thomas Dambo, and he's from, I want to say Finland or Denmark, and he designs these trolls made out of recyclable material, and they hide them around the community, and it becomes this whole troll hunt with portals and these trolls, and people come to the community, and they start in the city park, and there's a giant troll with, I believe, Alexa's elixir, and Alexa has this whole spell book that you can read and get the clues to find the next troll. And this becomes a great family adventure where people are coming to town and spending a whole day or spending several days finding the trolls. And then there's a portal over in Perham, and there's a portal in Fargo, portal at the community center in Detroit Lakes, and they're marked by tons of birdhouses, tons of color, and it's just a cool community activity that the whole family can enjoy. So the trolls have been something this year that have been new and pretty popular.
And these are not small trolls, by the way.
No, they are huge. The one is over, I want to say they're over 35 feet tall, and they stay until they go back to nature. So these will be here for the foreseeable future. And what a cool draw to the city, and what a cool and forward-thinking job by this 412 Foundation.
I didn't realize that they were going to be there just until they kind of re-enter the earth.
Yep.
I stumbled upon one. I knew that this was going on this last summer, and I was over in Detroit Lakes for a Crestliner event. And as I left, I was coming home, and I was on a frontage road. I saw a sign that said "Troll Parking Only," yep. and there were two cars there. And I went, oh, this must be where one of the trolls are. So, of course, I'm like, I'm going to take advantage of this. I got out and walked, and I got my picture taken by this very, very cool troll. Well, by the time I came back, the entire side of the street was packed with cars. Like they had just, it was just opening and had been discovered by the community.
And they actually, I know exactly where you're talking. They actually had to put in a parking lot because it got dangerous with people parking on the side of the road.
Oh my gosh.
They've made a parking lot now, and they've kind of turned it into a park where one of the founders or one of the early guys at Detroit Mountain had passed away a couple of years ago, and now they've put some horses up in remembrance of him. And it's just, Detroit Lakes is just a real community-minded area and a very welcoming area as far as letting people come in. And we oftentimes say, not even the community, but Jason, look at you, myself, we're open books in this area. Yeah. How many times have people reached out saying, I'm coming to town, where can I fish? And I have no problem giving you recommendations, suggestions, or even spots to go out and try, because plain and simple, it's a lot more fun when you're successful at fishing.
Oh, for sure. And not to mention, it's a lot more fun when you feel like you're welcome to that area.
100%. And there's areas that I didn't always feel welcome, or it was tough to fit in, or you were worried about getting chewed out for getting in somebody's spot. And I've never felt like that in this area. And, maybe that's why I've been here 20 years and I don't have any interest in going anywhere else for now.
One other thing that you brought up was the fish house.
Which fish house?
From the 412 Foundation organization, and talking about that they put up a fish house each year.
The ice house.
The ice house.
So
the ice house, yes. Ice house and fish house are very different in this situation.
Different. Yeah, so it was really cool for a number of years. They do an ice harvest where they bring in a company and they harvest the ice from Little Detroit, and they actually built this massive ice castle. And they had a castle a couple of years, and they've had I don't even know what you'd call it, but they've had different things where it wasn't quite as elaborate as the castle, but it's a great community event where they've got the bonfires down on the beach. They put the whole city park is in Christmas lights with different sculptures and different things that people have put effort into, and yeah, it's just a real community feel, and a lot of it was brought on by this new committee that has done some pretty cool things for the area.
Talking about harvesting the ice, have you ever used an ice saw?
I have, just for spear fishing.
Yeah.
But I have gone down and watched them actually harvest these big blocks of ice, and I forget what they weigh, but it was, each block weighed like 1,400 pounds, and I mean, it's insane.
They do this up on Lake Itasca too each year, and they'll do this big ice harvesting deal that the community can go to and see. I've never been to it. It looks neat. I've seen video and everything, but I love getting people out and cutting a spear hole and using the ice saw. I mean, if you've never angled through a spear hole before, you need to do it. Like, this is your year. Make it a priority because it's insane.
It opens a whole new world as far as what you're seeing and watching fish behavior. And yeah, it's almost relaxing, and I could sit and watch a spear hole or just watch those fish for hours. And even if you don't see fish, just watching the serenity of that lake and your jig and what comes by or what you see crawling along the bottom of the lake. And it's a lot different than looking down a 6 or an 8 inch hole. When you actually open up a big old spear hole, it's pretty cool.
It's so interesting, everybody's upbringing and personal experience with ice fishing, the way that they got into it. And for myself and all of my buddies in our area, everybody only had spear houses.
Yeah, I remember, when I was just a young, my grandpa would go out and sit out in the spear house all day, and Dad would come home from work and go check on his dad to make sure he was still out there and what he's got, and they were harvesting pike, and yeah, that was all that I ever knew was spear house fishing till I was probably in high school.
Did you fish in your grandpa's house then?
It was my dad's house, but yeah, his dad would come out and sit in it, and it was just the wood floor with the canvas around the side pulled tight and darker than dark, and sitting there in total darkness with your spear tied to the ceiling and waiting for your meal to swim by.
Was that one of those suitcase houses? I think it was Mankato.
Yeah,
Ice House Company.
We were never that fancy. This was, I'm sure, a home job that it didn't fold down. It sat behind the shed and maybe took the tarp off in the summer. But yeah, definitely the suitcase style. And I mean, I think overall spearfishing is where a lot of people got probably their first introduction to ice fishing.
Yeah, and angling in general for sure. One of my best buddies, he had one of the suitcase style houses. And I'll never forget when he bought it, too. Like, that was such a big deal. Our family could never afford to buy something like that. So when a friend would get something like that, you kind of reveled in it in the same way. But I remember those big wood sides for the suitcase, and you got to choose however wherever you put the hole. You just bought it with no holes in the floor, and then you cut the holes out yourself. And I remember him drying out the spear hole, the cut out of it, and keeping that piece so you could have it as the cover. And
put the little clamps on the side so you could fasten it back in when you were done. And yeah, what cool memories, and even looking at those fish houses, look at how fish houses have changed from that style to, Clam had the suitcase style for many years. I remember being on Devil's Lake and brought my dad's old Clam.
It was the 2000.
It wasn't even that. It was the suitcase style, but I remember.
Yeah, it was they called it the 2000, and it was a
6400.
Well, okay, there might have been that too, because the 2000 was that. I think it was the lower profile suitcase. I had the original giant
Clam
rectangular
sleeper?
box.
The Clam.
No, not the sleeper.
No,
that was even bigger.
Yes, but I remember being on Devil's Lake, and the wind was so strong that two of us could not physically get that tarp over the poles, because you set up your suitcase, you put the poles in, and now you've got this tarp that acted like a giant sail. And two of us college-age kids not able to pull that tarp over and just being frustrated.
I don't think people understand. It's literally like putting the frame to a square box.
Yes.
Okay. And then putting a T-shirt on
over the top
of it.
Only a very, very large T-shirt that catches the wind.
Oh my gosh, I will never forget watching a friend that had the wind catch that canvas, and I bet it went 100 yards up in the air.
Yep.
Like, is this thing ever going to come down?
Yep.
And then another time, and this was the worst part about those houses, if there was no snow, it was as soon as you put that tarp on, it was a goner.
Yeah, somebody had to sit in there and really had to have 1 foot through one of the holes on the ice, or else you were going to go with it.
And nobody had stakes back then.
No,
Stakes didn't exist.
Nope, you just went out there and hoped for the best. Yeah.
Oh,
help,
God.
help.
That same buddy, I'll never forget him putting up that house, and the wind blew. And you know, when you're on ice with no snow and you have no cleats on, you know what this run looks like, right? You've seen it on cartoons. It's like instead of bending their legs at their knees, they bend it at the ankles, and it's just their feet shuffling along. And so he's trying to sprint doing this across the entire lake. It never stopped until it hit the other shoreline.
Yep, I remember that. And then, do you remember, now the opposite of that is the clam sleeper. When they came out, I want to say the clam 8000, it had 8 holes, weighed 800 pounds, and if you had any snow, it took 3 men to push it because you weren't pulling the thing, and then you'd set it up wherever you were physically exhausted enough to stop, and that's just where you fish for the day.
Mine was the smaller version, so it didn't have a certain number of holes. Like it had this rectangle that could come out, and then you could just drill holes, or you could cut a spear hole. But the problem is those covers, when you would fold up the suitcase, that hole would be on the bottom of the fish house on one side.
Every time.
Every time.
Yep.
And so the fish house would fill up with snow.
Yep.
And on top of it, there was no type of contour to this big...
No, it was just a square brick.
Sandwich brick.
A giant brick.
So there's no... Like on a boat, there's a bow that is formed to cut through the water. Imagine if you drove a rectangular boat. Well, that's what this was like. I would pull it behind my snowmobile. And by the way, my snowmobile didn't have a lot of power. I had a Moto Ski 270.
I didn't even have a snowmobile. I had a car that I'd have to put it on top, and then we'd run the ratchet straps all the way through the windows and just get them up the best you could on your ride home.
I felt incredibly, fortunate that I had this snowmobile. It was 1972, and we bought it way used. I mean, it was a piece of junk, but it ran and it got me out on the lake. That's all I cared about. But when you would pull that house with any snow at all, you'd have to stop about every 100 yards, and you'd have to carry a shovel, and you'd have to shovel out the front of it.
Yep.
Oh, it was just exhausting.
Yeah, I don't want to go back to those days. I like what we have now so much better.
Do you think people lose something? Like, say somebody that's just getting into ice fishing now, do you think they've lost something by not having some of those struggles?
I think maybe they don't have the character. We built a lot of character doing a lot of things that...
Is that what it was? Was it building character? Or was it just accumulating stories?
Yeah, paying your dues, paying your tuition. Man. I mean, if you could go back... Yeah, there were times where it just wasn't worth pulling that house out, so I'm not going to.
Okay, because I know you've got a story about this. What is the worst experience you've ever had ice fishing in terms of like just effort versus return?
Vividly. It's one specific time. Clam 8000, the sleeper. Me and a buddy, he passed away now, but we pushed that thing along, Mobile Lake, one of those lakes in Bemidji, and we gave it everything we had, and we pushed it to this area we were sure it was going to have some fish, and we weren't smart enough to go pre-fish. We just headed out from the car and pushed this thing, and finally when we were exhausted, couldn't take it anymore, this is where we're going to fish. And get the poles up, we start putting the thing on, and lo and behold, I step in an unmarked spear hole. Right in we go. Now I'm cold, I'm wet, and this 5,000-pound fish house is now partially put up, and there's no way I'm going to be able to push this back to shore. So I had to go back, scared to leave everything, and go back, change clothes, come back out. And I was in college. I only had one pair of boots and one pair of bibs, so now I'm in my tennis shoes and had to go back and push that stupid thing back to shore. Yeah, risk versus reward was not there.
During the time that you were telling that story, of course, I have 5,000 doors that open up in my mind.
Oh, and let's hear one of them.
I don't even know where to start, honestly. I mean, I could pick out a part of each one, but if you're talking about the whole effort versus return, it would probably be on a lake north of Duluth. When I was married, my wife's cousin, she got a new four-wheeler, a big one, and had never used it. When we was into ice fishing, we wanted to go out, and so she and I went to this lake north of Duluth, and we had a ton of snow that year. And we got out on the lake, and there was slush everywhere, and we just kept getting stuck over and over and over and over. And you know, the kind where you shovel and shovel and shovel, and you're sweating so much that you're kneeling in the snow, dripping sweat.
Yep.
You've got your jacket unzipped, your whole back is wet, and then you got to take a deep breath and get on the snowmobile or on the ATV and hit the gas and go another 50 feet and do it again.
Do it again. Or I remember being the guy behind the ATV.
Oh, God.
Then you try to lift and push as the guy, and now you just get soaked.
Yeah.
You just get drenched, and yeah, like I said, you go, and you make it 50 yards, and you're right back to it again. And here we go again.
At the end of the day, we had spent 7 hours on the lake.
And how many of that were fishing?
We drilled one hole just to say that we did it.
Yep.
We weren't even remotely close to anywhere that had fish.
Yep.
But just to say that we tried to fish. But I think of other times too, man, like on guide trips where you're in the clear, the trip's done. All we got to do is get to shore.
Just get home.
Just get to shore. And that's where the obstacles come.
Yep. I have two crappie. The only two fish I have mounted are two crappies on the wall that came from a little lake north of Leech Lake. Again, college time, and it was late ice, and we went out and we caught a bucket full. You know, this college didn't even think about selective harvest.
No.
You know, these are 14, 15-inch crappies coming out of this lake, and we got our 10 or 15 at the time, I think was the limit. And coming back in, we're walking in, and all of a sudden you can feel the ice is going, and we are going to get wet. That whole sheet, and it goes on us, and I lose my bucket of fish, and all the fish take off, and I salvage 2. And then, to this day, I'd like to know the guy who said, if you ever go through the ice, you should crawl, spread out your weight. So I go through, and I hop back up, it's about chest deep, and I think I'm going to crawl. Well, I start crawling, and all of a sudden, left arm goes through, right arm goes through, left leg, right leg. Now I'm swimming again, dog paddling. So it did not spread out my weight. But when I got back to shore, I had 2 crappies that were 15 and 15 and a half inches left in my bucket. And I said, I am mounting these fish just for the memory of having this happen.
Man. Yeah, I probably would have done the same thing.
How dumb. How dumb were we?
Yeah.
Well, and you'd think, this is a college story now, Durham, you'd think that I would have learned. But if you recall Facebook posts just 2 seasons ago.
2 seasons ago, Canada.
No, it was Fort Peck. I spent a day
Fort Peck, wasn't it?
Spent a day on Fort Peck with Mitchell. And he, as the day is going, we're losing ice, and pretty soon our tip-ups are falling in on the edges. And I keep saying, Jason, the longer we stay here, the farther we're going to have to swim. And finally, about 3 o'clock, he said, yeah, we should probably go. And as grown men, as adults, we had to strip down to our underwear and hop in the lake and swim to shore.
And you two have attached frontal lobes.
They claim. I some days I wonder. Yeah, we could talk hours just talking Mitchell stories and experiences. You and
I both know firsthand that if you go with Mitchell, something probably is going to happen. What's beautiful is that most people don't know that.
You'll never hear about it. You'll never see it. It's just part of the adventure.
I'm excited for when Mitchell retires, because I'm hoping that there's going to be a bloopers video released, similar to Bill Dance.
Very, very possible.
Yeah.
How about driving 30 hours and arriving with 4 feet of snow and 5 feet of ice? I've done that with Mitchell.
Yeah.
Only having 2 augers with 1 extension, we've done that. We've had some great adventures, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
No.
But that's what makes all of this so awesome. What we do, what we get to experience in the outdoors, through the ice, through the open water, it's all part of the adventure, and I feel like I wouldn't trade it for a thing.
I hate to say it, but it's the adversity that really creates these stories.
Oh,
it's
sure.
never the success.
No,
It is sometimes the success. Don't get me wrong.
I very seldom share a story about what a great day fishing I had.
Right.
I'm way more likely to talk about how miserable it was, or what we went through, or the story. The memories are made by all those things that lead up to the time you are finally successful.
Well, and as human beings, that's just how our minds gravitate. Oh, he came and got the bait. He's going out the door. Should we follow him?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind knowing where
I
he's going.
put an Apple Air tag in the back of his car before I came in. No,
Very smart.
We're just checking out his license plates. That's all. No.
We see him at one of the local lakes. I'll know where he came from.
If I saw him on the lake, I'd say, hey, I honestly didn't follow you.
Right, I promise.
That's one big thing for me. I have people that come up and share information with me sometimes unsolicited, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll just walk up and go, hey, I did so well on the fish the other day. And they'll tell me everything. They'll tell me exactly where they went.
Yep.
And I have to say, I don't want the information.
Right.
I think people think that they're
doing you a favor?
Doing you a favor, and it's actually doing the opposite.
Especially, I think it's a little bit different for maybe the situation you or I are in, living in this area, and that's what I had referred to earlier. If somebody needs some information, there's a ton of people willing to share it.
Yeah.
We're willing to share it. I've got a great story for 15, 20 years ago. I spent a lot of time fishing Lake Lida. It was the lake that I fished and filmed several shows out there. I felt confident that I could go out there at any point and catch fish. And finally, I realized I wasn't doing myself any favors because I got spot-itis so bad that's where I went all the time. That was my spot. And with all the other lakes that I wasn't paying any attention to, I felt as though I wasn't helping myself as an angler. And so I had to literally force myself for 2 years. I'm not going to step foot on this lake, and I'm going to go try different lakes. And I really believe that helped me as an angler to come up with new patterns, new ideas. The fish were doing totally different things on different lakes than they were on Lake Lida at that time. And I had to force myself to do it. But I think that when you're here, I don't need to do the same thing over and over. I'm not going to ever better myself as an angler. Instead, I like hopping around to different lakes. And like I said, you will strike out, and you'll strike out often. But every now and again, you get a really good one, or you get something that I can just tuck away and say, hey, you know what? I don't need to come back here now until we're going to film.
Right.
Or we need some picture fish or something. And, that's part of the process, but that's also keeping it very, unpressured. And, if you're on the same lake every night for 5 nights, somebody's going to notice you. Somebody's going to come and check it out. So I make it a real habit of when I find a good bite, and unless I, want a meal of fish or I want to send somebody there, I don't typically go back. And I think that's very different than, some anglers that come to the area. And for those anglers, we've got great community holes that'll put out fish all the time.
We do. I know you're the same way, that you'll have times where, you go to a lake that maybe you haven't even been to it, and you find fish that are active and they're big, and you have this wonderful day, and the next day you could easily go back there.
100%.
You could go and do it again.
Yep.
But instead you go somewhere else that you've never been.
Yep.
And you try to figure out this whole puzzle again.
And that I can't stress enough how common that is. And I'll have guys that'll flat out say, well, why wouldn't you go to that spot you were catching those fish? Because I know they're there. There's so many other places to check. There's so many potential bites. And what if I get that spot-itis again, and I'm sticking with this one spot here, and the next lake I was going to check was even going to be better, or was going to have a pattern that was going to be totally different, but I was going to figure it out. And maybe something's wired different in us where we like to think that way. And you as a fishing guide, and it's not always about the easiest catch or the easiest bite. It's about trying to figure out the nuances and put them together.
It's the process.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you sit down at a table and put together a puzzle, when you're all done, you have this satisfaction, but that's not the whole reason that you did it. It was that whole process in between too, and each piece that clicked together. Same with ice fishing. When you go out there and you're successful in one part of it, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I can do this.
Right.
And it feels good.
And it does. And it's that dopamine rush. It's that, look what I did. And I can't explain it. I have a guy who calls often for advice and looking for information. And I said, I did really well here. Well, why aren't you back there? And it's almost like he doesn't believe me that I
Right.
did well there.
I've had that before too. Like they're like, well, if you caught so many fish there, why aren't you there now?
Yeah, and I remember having a clam photo shoot, and we were on Lake Melissa, just a real popular community spot, Detroit Lakes. And I remember bringing the guys out, and one of the guys dropping down, and 12-inch crappie after 12-inch crappie after 12-inch crappie, middle of the day. And he's saying, if I lived here, I'd do this every day.
Right.
And I said, no, you wouldn't, because there's you can only do it for so long before. And I don't want to use the term the thrill is gone, because I love catching fish, but I know they're here. You could come and do this every day, but I don't keep a lot of fish, and I'd rather go try to find something else. And like I said, when it works out, it's great. When it doesn't, it's just paying your tuition and putting in your time, and maybe the next one will pan out.
Well, and even just from area to area, that whole idea of what is good, what is success, what is successful when you're fishing varies greatly. For instance, you go to Lake Erie.
Sure.
You catch a limit of 6-pound walleyes or 7 or 8-pound walleyes and keep them and eat them.
Yep.
It's very different here. You catch a 6 or 7 or 8-pound walleye here, you go, I've made a big accomplishment.
100%. And maybe that's something we touch upon, is the expectations of Minnesota or this area of walleye fishing versus panfish versus perch fishing even.
Absolutely. And just that whole idea of the satisfaction part of it. Our limit is going to be dropping.
Which I'm fine with.
I'm totally good with it.
I like that idea. Here in Minnesota, it is very, very rare that I can go out in the winter, and with the exception of Lake of the Woods and maybe Leech Lake, Red Lake, some of those. But it's in the area I live in. If I go out and I get 2, 3, 4 walleyes in a night, that was a good night.
That was a good night.
You typically have a short bite window. You can sit there all night and you might pick away one here, one there, but you've basically got an hour window where these fish are going to go. And if you get 2, 3 that are small enough or big enough to keep, because it never fails to get into some 12-inchers and every now and then you get a 22, a 23 that you're letting go. But the expectation has to be realistic for the area you're in as well.
For sure. I have to deal with that a lot as a guide, where people will call and they'll say, well, we usually go on a couple ice fishing trips, and this year we wanted to go somewhere different.
Yep.
And well, what do you want to catch? Well, we want to catch perch, jumbo
Sure.
perch.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you usually go? Well, we've been to Lake of the Woods. We've been to Devil's Lake. Yeah, it's not going to happen in my area. Even as you get over towards UNDL, the perch fishing is even a little bit better here, but it's still not.
I had a lake.
I wouldn't typically go out and go, hey, I'm going perch fishing today.
Right. I have a lake that consistently, and I don't know why this is, but for years I would go out there, and if you could catch a lot of perch, a lot of 8-inch perch, even 9-inch, and if you fished for a couple hours, you could keep 10-inch perch.
Sure.
And then I would be excited because next year,
right,
it's going to be
right.
amazing. And that went on for 5 years, and it always seemed like after a couple hours I could keep 10-inch perch, and they never got bigger. And even with this first ice just kind of happening, I saw guys posting pictures of these jumbo perch, and I was drooling. Well, they're coming out of farm ponds over in North Dakota.
Right.
We just don't. That's not a realistic expectation. Just like if you're coming to a Detroit Lakes area and you think I'm going to go out and catch a 6-man limit of walleyes, we're all coming up to walleye fish.
Right.
That isn't a real expectation. Now, you want to start looking for your panfish, your sunfish, your crappies. 100%, that's a real expectation. But again, there's enough lakes that have those community spots that you can practice selective harvest. And there's also a lot of lakes that have the reduced size limit or reduced limits. And you can go onto those lakes and have the reasonable expectation that I'm going to catch my 5 crappies over 10 inches or my 5 over 11 inches. And you can do that.
And it just goes back to the whole idea of, if you want to catch like big fish, like a lot of people, they want to catch a trophy, right? That's kind of their MO. If you want to catch a trophy fish, you got to go where trophy fish live. You can't go to that lake that 10 inches that they never get bigger.
Yep.
They just don't have the potential to do that. It's kind of like, think of it from the human perspective, and you go, well, there has to be some like magic recipe to make these fish bigger. That's like saying there's a magic recipe to make me bigger. You can make me fatter, but I'm not going to get taller.
No, I think you're done growing.
I hope so. Gosh.
Amen. No, you're 100% right. Some lakes will never have the potential to put together a 10-inch bluegill. There are lakes that will never have the potential to put out a 15-inch crappie.
Right.
That has to do with genetics. It has to do with the food base. It has to do with a lot of factors that you have to keep that in mind. If you're looking for a trophy fish, then you need to fish trophy fish waters and maybe lower those expectations of, I'm not going to go out there and catch 50 fish today. I am looking for 5 fish or 2 fish.
So if somebody wants to catch a trophy fish of some kind,
Yep.
they want a personal best, what are they going to find in DL?
You have the potential in the Detroit Lakes area with so many lakes, and again, that's not to plug the 412 Foundation, but it got its name because of the 412 lakes within, I want to say, 20 miles of downtown Detroit Lakes. Of those 412 lakes, there are probably 400 of them that will never produce a trophy fish. They're going to produce great limits of fish at times. They're going to produce fantastic recreational areas. There's a lot of, fast action. But there are only maybe 12 of those lakes that are going to produce a trophy caliber fish. The genetics are there, the food is there, and the pressure isn't what it is on other lakes. So you have to hedge your bets by going and focusing on those lakes. And so you might, you're going to have to do a little bit of research. Great way is to look at the DNR Lake Finder. They do creel surveys and they do netting surveys. You can look at that and see the size structure. If you start seeing fish in there that are, 13, 14-inch crappies, 9 and 10-inch bluegills, that's a lake that it's got potential, and it's one that you maybe want to spend a little time with.
So talking about trophies, I posed this question to Jaden Thomas from Shields the other day. What defines a trophy in your mind? What defines a trophy? Is it something that is individual to the person, or should there be some type of system category and that you blatant, because some people will say, well, I caught this big fish, and somebody else goes, that's not big. So should there be some type of
consensus? I don't think there needs to be consensus. I don't think there needs to be any more rules made about personal fishing preferences and options. I also think that the eye of a trophy is truly up to the individual. And I can tell you that there was a time that if I caught a 30-inch walleye, it was going on the wall. It was going to be that trophy. And I think that even in my mind, that's changed. Now, a 30-inch walleye, it's very rare for me, and it's a heck of a trophy, but geez, a 28-inch is a darn nice fish. Maybe that's that trophy potential. I kind of, in my mind, a 15-inch crappie is kind of where you're at that trophy. A 10-inch bluegill's where you're at that trophy. And the other thing is, if you're going to start getting nitpicky about that, a true 10-inch bluegill or a true 15-inch crappie on a bump board with their mouth closed, without their tail pinched. I mean, there's a lot of different things that come into view. And as a guide, you see it. When you get guys out on the boat, are they squeezing that extra eighth of an inch, trying to get that trophy in their mind? I
had an interesting thing with this summer, actually. I had a guy on the boat that caught a walleye that was 29 3/4 inches, right? Beautiful fish. And it was blind in one eye. And this eye that it was blind in, it literally looked like you were staring into the end of a black olive. I mean, it was just very unique. Well, anyway, I posted a picture of this on social media, and I said, we released this fish. If anybody else catches it this year, I'd love to see a picture, right? It only took about 30 minutes, and I had a picture of it, but it wasn't after we caught that fish. It was before we had caught it. And the guy says, I caught this, whatever. Well, it was the guy's cousin that sent me the picture.
Okay.
This is the angler's cousin. And he said, just to let you know, though, he called it 30 inches. And I go, okay, this is interesting. Thanks, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Well, then about a month later, I got another picture of it. And it was from another fishing guide. And he said, hey, we caught that fish again, but I want to let you know we're posting it as 30 inches.
Uh-huh.
He goes, I don't know how you didn't get that fish to touch 30 inches. He goes, I measured it 3 times, and I even got it to touch 30 1/4 inches.
Okay.
I reflected on this a lot.
Oh, 100%.
Because why didn't I make it hit 30 inches?
I'm with you. I've been in the boat way too many times when a 50-inch muskie's hit the floor or a 30-inch walleyes hit the floor. Yet I was there and I never saw those fish get put on a bump board or even a tape measure be brought out.
Right.
And I've caught a lot of fish, look at Rainy River, things like that. And I'm telling you, I can't tell you if it's 28, 28 and a half, 29, 30. They all look the same. And when you put that fish on, unless you have a truly special fish that you know is a giant, but unless you put that 28-incher on a bump board, it may get called 30. Just like 10-inch bluegills, I can't tell you how many times I've had guys show me 10-inch bluegill. Oh,
right.
Those are 9, 8.5s, or a 15-inch crappie with its mouth wide open.
Right.
I don't care. I am so past that point in my fishing world and in my life that if it's a trophy to you, if you want to call it 30 inches, call it 30 inches. I'll call it 32 for you. I just don't care.
So the problem with my situation was I was kind of the judge and jury.
Right.
I mean, when they look to me as the guide, what I say goes. I mean, if I say you caught a 28.5-inch fish and then you go and tell people you caught a 30-inch fish and I catch wind of this, they might think, well, he's going to be upset with us or something, which I wouldn't. It's, your fish, my gosh.
Yep. Tell your own fish stories.
But why didn't I make that fish hit 30 inches? Because I made sure that mouth was closed as tight as it could be, and I pinched the tail. But you and I both know that making a 1/4 inch, 1/4 of an inch on a board, it's literally not even an illegal hole. It wouldn't even be an illegal measurement.
Nope.
Like in a tournament, the mouth would still appear closed and whatever. But I get in the habit of where I just push the mouth up tight, I push the head tight to the end of the board, and I pinch the tail, and that's what it is. But why didn't I give that man that fish? That is the 30-inch mark is a true trophy, right? There's no reason that I should have held back from granting him that wish because was it a 30-inch fish?
Probably.
It was.
But a 29 7/8 inch fish is still a trophy fish to me.
Thank you. To you.
Yeah, maybe we get these numbers put in, and I don't know that numbers matter. It's about I can tell you one thing: my 13-year-old son gets a 26-inch walleye, and he'll swear it's 30 up and down, and I won't let him call it 30 just out of pure principle. But a 24, 25, 26-inch walleye to a kid or to somebody who doesn't spend, that's a giant.
Hey, I still get excited about 24, 25-inch walleyes when they come up. I don't get the, I think it's a 30 excitement. But, man, don't you wish you could go back to that?
Yes, I really do. And that's why I think it's important that, it's good to slap them back to reality every now and then. Nope, bud, that was not a 30-inch fish. I measured that fish for you. When you get a 30, you're going to know it.
Okay, so now you've got somebody out that you are friends with, but they're not your best friend, but you're friends with them, right? And they catch a 28.5.
Yep.
And then in the next conversation, when you're talking to some guys and they ask you how it went,
they got a 30.
They got a 30. Do you?
Now, if
do you mention it or do you just let it ride?
Well, it depends on how good a friend's.
That's what I'm saying.
If it's a good friend of mine, no way I'm letting him get away with it. No way. out of pure friendship, I will call them out every single time.
So then, Tony, why don't you just give him the trophy?
Because he's a friend. No, I am way harder on my friends than I am my enemies. But no, if that's a good buddy of mine, I'm gonna hold him. That was a 28.5-inch fish. You know it, and I know it. Now, if that's an acquaintance or if it's somebody who's going out with me and first-time angler, I'm gonna let it slide. Let them have that trophy in their mind. Because if it's a trophy, whether it's a 24-inch or a 26-inch or an 18-inch. Look at an 18-inch walleye. That's a darn nice walleye.
That's a really nice walleye.
And if somebody, that's their biggest walleye, you know what? They got themselves a trophy. Go ahead and eat that fish and enjoy it. No, I think we put a lot more pressure on trophy, the tag trophy than needs to be. There was a time when it drove me nuts when I'd see people posting pictures of, oh, look at this bucket of 10-inch bluegills. There's not a 10-inch bluegill in there. And it's like, that would drive me nuts. And now I think maybe it's an age thing, or you just got to let it go. I don't care. Call it whatever you want.
I was thinking the same thing, like from, I don't know what age it was, but where I used to get upset with that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It used to bug me bad.
Or you see somebody post a picture of, I got this 15-inch crappie, and I just want to put, well, why did you post a picture of the 12-incher if you got a 15-incher? Because that's not a 15-inch crappie. And it would bug me. And then let it go. It's not worth the effort. Anglers in general, fishermen in general, you all tell fish stories at times. If that's somebody's fish story, let them have their fish story and let them enjoy it.
So years ago in college, I had a class. We were talking about the internet earlier.
Yes.
My class was Intro to the Internet.
That was my senior year of college.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I had this in year 2 at Bemidji State. What was your textbook? Do you remember? Because I remember mine vividly.
No, but I can tell you my email program and what we searched for on the first day.
Oh, elaborate.
Well, I don't want to take away. So I remember the email program was called Dog Mail.
Oh, yeah.
And you would bring it up, and then you'd hit fetch, and this little dog would run across your screen. And if he came back with a paper in his mouth, it meant you had mail. And the only person I ever got an email from was my dad, because he had an email account at work. He was the only person I ever got. And then I still remember the search bar on Intro to the Internet. We had to go in, and we looked up yahoo.com.
Yep.
And CNN.com. And then this dog mail was how you got into your email. That's really all I remember. And I mean, there was no surfing the internet. There wasn't even chat forums or anything. I mean, it was just, this is the internet. Welcome to it.
Well, and that was BSU.
Yep.
So my second year, I take this class, and the internet was just all text. And my textbook was The Internet for Dummies.
No.
Yeah, that was the textbook, to give you an idea. And we had to do some of those same things using search engines like Webcrawler and Metacrawler. Yep. They don't even exist anymore.
No, Yahoo was the big one that I remember vividly, going to yahoo.com, and there was like news stories, and you could get into email, but that wasn't the university-based email. You had to use this dog mail.
Yeah, well, we had to sign up for email as well. I signed up for Hotmail.
Oh yeah, so did I.
It's still my main email account.
And
I know I get a bad time about it all the time. You have a Hotmail account? I do. I am openly admitting that.
And what is it? Fish with Jason at Hotmail?
Go Fish Guides.
Go Fish Guides at Hotmail. Huh.
But I've had that forever. Don't ask me what the password is, because this was college days. Anyway, we had to get on a post board at the time, a message board, right? And again, it's all just text. And we had to find something that we were interested in. So there's all these different categories, and there wasn't a fishing one, and there wasn't an outdoors one, but there was a bodybuilding one. And at that time, I was into that. I was into bodybuilding. I wasn't good at it because I didn't understand bodybuilding.
Sure.
I just lifted weights and tried to look better and feel better, right?
And you had those dimples and that handsome face.
That doesn't come with bodybuilding.
Well,
that's
hurt.
genetics.
It doesn't hurt it.
That's genetics.
I'm just saying.
But on this post board, they were talking about protein, which now protein is all over everything, but back then it was a little quieter in society. But I knew that to build a lot of muscle, that was a key element.
Sure.
And somebody had asked on this post board, well, how much protein should you ingest a day? Well, I was big into reading bodybuilder magazines and all this stuff, and they were talking about how many grams you should have per pound of body weight. And one person commented, and they said, well, you should have about X number of grams per day. And I chimed in, and I went, oh, no, here's what you need. And kind of...
You were one of the first internet trolls?
It was bad. It was actually really bad. I first acted as an expert.
Sure.
Which I wasn't. I read a couple articles, right? I wasn't I wasn't competing in this. I wasn't the poster child for this. It's not like I looked like I knew what I was saying. And then this person kind of commented back, and I got on him hard. And I did this a few different times, and I didn't feel like inside of myself that I was doing that. I thought I was just kind of convincing them.
Sure, you're
to
spreading
believe
the knowledge.
what I believed. And they chimed in pretty quick and said, "Hey man, like, easy. I'm just
Right.
trying to be healthy here, and you're kind of jumping all over me." And it was a really good lesson right away. Like, I take that stuff to heart, and it's meaningful. So, I mean, from that point on, it has been really difficult for me to watch social media and watch some of those things that people jump on each other like that, where they're trying to convince them or, you know, make them think that their way is the only way, where in reality, what a cool opportunity to see everybody's way.
You know, that's a great point. And I was going to say, I wish more people maybe would have that first experience of really being able to be reflective on the fact that, you know what, you can't tell sarcasm, you can't tell tone, things like that in a post. And you're right, it's taken me years. I'm active on social media. However, I'm very cautious about getting into the gunfights. You know, I am the last person to want to chime in, because it seems like I don't want to bring a knife to that gunfight. I don't need to get beat up over something silly. And I think as anglers, as outdoorsmen, a lot of people, maybe if they just step back and think, do I really need to chime in on this? It doesn't affect me. If that fish isn't as big as you think it is, and this guy wants to call it whatever, do I need to comment? And sometimes just less is more, Jason. Less is more.
I was just thinking about, I had this vision in my head of you and I right now across the table going just head to head, screaming at each other. Well, it's this and it's this and it's this. And all of a sudden one of us just breaks and goes, I know, you're right. Could you imagine if the world was like that? That just every conversation that where people argued, all of a sudden somebody just realized and they went, I know, you're right. And they just turned around and walked away from each other.
With tears. Let's have tears, because you broke me.
You like a stallion, a Mustang.
Yeah, I'm thankful we're not there, but you just have to take it to heart when it comes to social media, internet platforms. There's no sense in being that guy that hides behind the internet, or you know, the anonymous posters. I always like those that come in as an anonymous poster, and if you can't put your name behind it, I take your opinion with a grain of salt.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, we've chatted for a long time at the very historic Osage Bait and Tackle, but before we go, tell me something you're excited about this year. Something that you're really looking forward to on the ice, or something that you just want to share with the anglers that are going to be venturing out this ice season, and something that they can do to be more successful.
I think, without being prompted on this, it's I'm going to say I'm excited for the upcoming season's potential. It's been a few years since we've had really cold temperatures at the beginning of December, the end of November, and lack of snowfall. So if we look at the forecast going forward over the next 10 days, it doesn't look like we're going to get any snow. And with the exception of Wednesday of this week, it looks like we're going to be in the single digits. We should be building ice, and we should have a safe beginning to the ice season. And I think that having a safe beginning to the ice season and letting us get, you know, that 8, 10, 12 inches of ice, which we will have in 2 weeks if this continues, is going to allow us to have a long ice season, which, you know, we've cut short the last couple of years, but by building a good base now, I'm super excited about the potential for having ice maybe going into March and April, and, you know, or even May, as we've had in the past. And so the better base we get now, the more likely that's going to happen. And I'm also super excited just to get my kids out on the ice, you know, sneak away between hockey whenever we can. And they're finally to the age where they're so self-sufficient that I can drop them off with a Vexilar and their own rod, and they get their fish off. They can deal with tangles. If they break their line, they can retie. And so that's what I'm really looking forward to. How about you?
Well, I'm just looking forward to getting out. I'm excited that we have a year that I would consider to be, in loose terms, normal.
Sure.
Because there really is no normal anymore. But, I mean, you and I both know that we set a goal of getting on the ice by Black Friday.
Sure.
I mean, but of course you and I are not going to push that to achieve it, but we like to see people out by that point. And we've done that this year. People have achieved that. We like to see people out being able to take vehicles around Christmas so they can enjoy that holiday out on the ice with their wheelhouses. Yep. That's probably going to happen.
Yep.
So I'm just looking forward to everybody being able to get out and enjoy the sport more than anything. I'm looking forward to that whole social piece of it. And we've missed that for a couple of years. So
we have, and that's a big part of ice fishing and what people love about it. It's that camaraderie. It's that, it's that 5 ice castles all in a circle that guys can drive up and visit with. Somebody's got a pot of chili on, and it's a sport that the whole family can enjoy, and it's a great chance to get out and hang out with your friends.
Well, Tony, I of course want to thank you immensely for not only being on the show with me today, but just being a great friend too.
Hey man, I appreciate it. This was awesome. This is a great location. Again, we both passed some good lakes on the way, but maybe we need to make some time to actually get together this winter and spend some time on the ice.
That is actually my New Year's resolution this year, is to take more time and to spend more time with people that I want to spend time with. So we'll definitely be back here. I can smell the burgers cooking on the griddle right now. And
I can too.
Yeah, I think we should probably do that before we leave. Anyway, this is Jason Durham with the Ice Team Podcast, wishing everybody a safe and successful ice fishing season. And I'm hoping you stay safe, stay smart, and be a hero. Take somebody fishing.